Welcome to the Advancing Innovation in Adult Education podcast series, funded by the Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education at the U.S. Department of Education. In this interview, Judy Alamprese, Principal Scientist at Abt Associates, will be speaking with Sue Pierson, Director of Adult Education at the Connecticut Department of Education, about the role of state adult education staff in supporting innovation in local adult education programs. The example of innovation that will be discussed is the National External Diploma Program, or NEDP. The NEDP is a web-based alternative high school credentialing program for adults and out-of-school youth. It is a competency-based applied performance assessment system that enables learners to demonstrate their skills in a series of simulations that parallel work and life activities, and to earn a traditional high school diploma based on their mastery of those skills. The NEDP does not provide instruction, but uses the diagnostic assessment phase to determine learners' readiness to participate in a generalized assessment phase. Learners must demonstrate 100% mastery of their skills in 10 academic and life skill competency areas, and participate in an individualized assessment, which they demonstrate skills related to college and career competencies.
This is Judy Alamprese from Abt Associates, and I'm speaking with Sue Pierson from the Connecticut Department of Education. Sue, it's a pleasure to talk with you this afternoon about the role of state adult education staff in supporting the adoption of innovative practices in adult education programs. And in particular, we're going to talk about the National External Diploma Program, which is known as the NEDP. As you know, the Advancing Innovation Project has recognized the NEDP as an innovative practice because of its significant enhancements during the past decade that include aligning academic and life skill competencies with the U.S. Department of Education's career and college readiness standards in adult ed, the refinement of the college and career competencies in the individualized assessment part of the NEDP, and then the transition of the NEDP most recently to a total online delivery system. So, Sue, as the State Director of Adult Education in Connecticut, what has motivated you to encourage the adoption of the NEDP in adult education programs in your state? And what factors in adult education in Connecticut do you think have contributed to this motivation?
Well, first of all, Judy, I want to thank you for having me today to talk about this program that's been part of my life for a very long time, and I believe in it very strongly. My personal experience is I began with the program many years ago as a practitioner. And as a practitioner, I saw quickly how it served certain adult learners in a way that was different from the programs we already had for high school completion in Connecticut. We already have the GED exam as our state diploma, and we have our adult credit diploma program, which is a local diploma. And so quickly I learned that NEDP served adults who were maybe a little bit older and had some experience in life, and also found it difficult to come into classes twice a week or 3 times a week, or were nervous about taking tests, where the NEDP didn't have all of that anxiety for them. They gave them the chance to just demonstrate their skills and knowledge more easily than the other options we had. And they received credit in a way. We call it credit, but they actually are receiving credit for their knowledge and experience in life.
So given your personal experience in this, and then as you became state director, what strategies have you used to really prompt adult education local program staff interest in the NEDP and to get their willingness to actually implement the program?
So, we would have our annual conference, as most states do, and I always would get a session booked in there to make sure there was always something about NEDP in there. And I would do a session with our trainers, other trainers, and we would talk about the program and who it served. We would talk quickly about the other 2 options, but really focus on NEDP to make sure people understood who it served, what kind of student it would benefit. And then several years ago, we used our federal adult ed AFLA Title II funds to expand the program so that in Connecticut, our federal funds are used as improvement projects because we are already funded with state dollars. So this way, people who maybe have thought they would like to try the NEDP or they were sort of on the fence, it gave them the opportunity to apply for some funding to help them get started and get off the ground. And so that's what we did several years ago. And it's helped us expand the program because with their state dollars, they can only serve people in their community. But with their federal dollars, they can expand outside their community. And so rather than having every single adult ed program offer this, we were able to have, a certain number who could expand it around the whole state. And that's worked out very well.
Tell us about how the state office over time has really supported programs implementation of the NEDP, and particularly as it kind of migrated to an online program. The NEDP has three major components of activities and has different phases and has assessors and advisors and, different roles people play. Tell us about, from the state's perspective, how you're supporting local programs implementation.
We implemented many years ago having an annual meeting, a mandated meeting of all NEDP staff in the state so that they could come together and sort of share any kind of issues, any concerns they had with the program. They could really talk it out. We would also present items for them to that maybe came up during the year that we thought they could sort of hash out and talk about together. So we did that. We do that every year so that they come together once a year. We also meet with program directors, anyone who has a director who has a program, NEDP, with their lead assessor comes together once a year so that the directors really get the understanding of the program and making sure that they understand the protocols and regulations around it. We also developed a site agreement or a provider agreement that also establishes the protocols for the program, making sure that there's space provided and that the staff is trained properly and, all those kinds of things. We also have our own trainers in Connecticut. We've maintained our own trainers in Connecticut, where CASAS also does training. But we've maintained our own trainers who do the annual training of anybody new that wants to start to be a practitioner, and also developed a refresher training and provide technical assistance to staff throughout the year.
So it sounds like as a state leader, what you did was to look at the various requirements for the program. And since this is a secondary credentialing process for which adults earn a regular high school diploma, there are some must-dos, if you will, involved in the whole process, and then thought about the ways in which your training and technical assistance activities that are ongoing in the state can support that implementation, and then trying to at least move some of those activities so that they become institutionalized over time. Do you think that's a really important thing for state leaders to think about when they're looking at practices that they hope, will persist over time?
Absolutely. In the beginning, when I started this program as a practitioner, you work one-on-one and sometimes gets isolated. And so therefore, that's why I established, for my own experience, this annual meeting so that we could talk things out. But as a state director, I learned that these protocols had to be followed. Like I said, I have that site agreement, provider agreement that, every director and lead assessor signs for me at the beginning of every year that says that they agree they're going to do all of this. And when I find that some of those things aren't being followed, one of the things in there is to actually serve so many adult learners per year and have so many graduates per year. And if I find that they're not doing that, because I can look at their data and find that out, I can put them on probation, or I can at least talk to them about what's going on. I've had them do action plans to show how they're going to improve their work and improve their recruitment. I've done a lot of that more recently, but the remote delivery of the program has really helped an awful lot this past year. I'm so thrilled that CASAS was able to get that going very early on during the beginning of the pandemic. They were sort of on the way to do that already, and it happened that it worked out perfectly. And our practitioners have been telling me how they're getting more and more people who are less nervous about it as they get comfortable with technology, which is another great skill that our adults need to have. It's a confidential diploma for them because they don't have to come into a building. And they also are serving their adult learners, their students, at different times of day and evening. I just heard from some practitioners the other day who said they were meeting with their students at 9:00 at night because that was the time they had a computer available. There's been all of these kinds of things that have been great for NEDP. But as you said, as the state leader and making sure these things are followed, having that provider agreement right in the beginning and having them sign them meeting with them a couple of times a year, making sure, and also, just being available to answer any questions, or being available if there's questions I can't answer and it's more of a trainer issue, I pass that off to the trainer.
Right. So it's exciting about the effects that going online can have when it draws in more people and gives them more flexibility. I think that's really quite nice.
Which, the program was very flexible in before, because you would meet with them, you would set up your time with a client, student, which was amenable to them as well as the assessor, so that, you were able to meet with them when it was convenient for them. If their shift changed at work, your shift changed at work to accommodate them. And so it was flexible before, but now with the remote delivery, it's really helped expand the program, and it's very exciting.
That's great. What advice would you give to other state directors about supporting innovation in a state's adult education program?
If you look at what you offer in your program already in your state, I understand most states are offering a high school credential through an exam like a GED or a high set. We know that's not for everybody. It's just not going to fit everyone. When we have people spend a lot of time preparing to take that test, and, life goes on, and we tend to, we have adult learners that are not 18, 19 years old. They're 30, 40, and 50 years old and whatever, and they need that credential that the NEDP certainly will serve them well. Like I said, that more mature adult who really doesn't have time for class or all the things that I mentioned earlier, test anxiety, that this is the perfect option to have another option for them, and not a better option, but a different option to give your state some flexibility. There's two things I will say. We say to our people, bloom where you're planted. So if we can give them more than one place to be planted, they will bloom. And the other thing is that I always say, if you don't have this program, there are definitely people you're not serving in your state. Definitely not. There are lots of people out there who need diplomas. We know that, and we can't serve them all. But if you have this option, we'll help you serve more than you have been.
So it sounds like, Sue, a major concern for you over the years as the state leader has been to really look at access to adult education and opportunity. And that part of the value of having more than one or two options for a high school credential is that it will draw in a wider range of potential clients and give them kind of options they might not have. And do you think that's true for, other aspects for instruction?
Yes. And what will happen with our adult learners who are NEDP candidates, for instance, who might need help with their work, they're then working with the adult ed program, or maybe we tend to tell them you can get any help you can get. If it's your daughter, your husband, your son, your mother, whatever, get that help, because we want you to work on your own. But they're also in adult ed programs are providing tutors to help them with their work. They're providing a student cohorts where they'll work together on their own as long as there's no teacher involved in this program. But certainly it will increase access to adult education when you can share that you have more than the traditional test. They all come in to get their GED. Right. Everybody says, I want my GED. And we'll say, well, you know what? We have a couple of things here that you might be interested in. So once you get into a program, you get registered, and then our counselors and intake people will tell you more about what they offer. You're right. Your access to adult education should increase. Your numbers should increase just for the fact that you offer more than the traditional one you've been using.
And another, just one final aspect of the NEDP that I think is worthy to point out is that, increasingly we look at adult education as a step towards something, not the end point. And the college and career competencies for the individualized assessment is that time when an NEDP candidate has the opportunity to think about next steps. We've seen that in the program that was recognized as part of the NEDP, from Connecticut. So is that an important part also in making sure that folks just don't leave the adult ed program with not a good sense of where they might go?
As part of the diagnostic phase of the program, they're doing self-assessments of their own skills and what their own goals are, so that at the end of the program, they can reach that goal, first of all, they get the credential, but then they know they've already given themselves the opportunity to find out what they want to do, what they need to do, and then we can show that they've gotten that credential and they can move on to post-secondary education, training, jobs. It definitely lends itself to bringing people to the next step, as we know is very important, not just the credential. We know that for sure.
Well, thank you, Sue, for your reflections on the importance of supporting innovation in adult education, and in particular, for your reflections on the NEDP.
Thank you, Judy.
Thank you so much for listening to the Advancing Innovation podcast series. Please visit Advancing Innovation on the LINCS website at links.ed.gov under State Resources and then Federal Initiatives.